Hi, sixth graders. Good morning. Happy Monday. I know you've seen this slide already, but remember that if you can tell me what movie this is from and you can talk to your parents about it too, they might know better than you do on this one. You can email me. If you get the answer correct, you get 2 cat paw cash. If you get it wrong, you get 1. So that is that. And happy Monday. Okay, for our book talk today, we are going to be talking about the book Maximum Ride. I think Siobhan's reading this right now. Maximum Ride is a series, but this is the first book in the series. So if you like it, it's good because there's lots more. So it's about this group of kids that are like regular kids, but they have been genetically engineered they have wings, and some of them have some powers and stuff like that. So they can fly, and they're kind of trying to save the world, things like that, from these bad guys. This book is very suspenseful at times. It's intense. It's exciting. It's a very fast read. Even though it's over 400 pages, it'll go fast. It also is funny at times. It's written by James Patterson, who wrote like the middle school Get Me Out of Here books and stuff like that. So he's a great writer and really knows how to make an exciting story and keep you turning the pages. So anyway, that's Maximum Ride the Angel Experiment. It's science fiction because technically, I guess, like these things could happen if science advanced enough. So if you are interested in this book, give me an email. I will put it aside for you. Okay. So as you know, today is Monday. It's our super short day, so we're going to go through things pretty fast. This week, we're going to be talking about agriculture of the early humans. So today, we're just going to review Hunters and Gatherers from last week, and I'm going to introduce agriculture a little bit to you. And then we're going to read Boy the Painted Cave, and that's pretty much it. So in review of Hunters and Gatherers, they lived during the Paleolithic era, which is also known as the Old Stone Age. The Paleolithic Age began about 2.5 million years ago and then lasted until about 8,000 BC. Paleolithic people often moved around in search of food. They were nomads. That means they traveled around kind of following their food source. Paleolithic people survived by hunting and gathering. The search for food was their main activity, and it was often difficult. So their whole world and their whole lives centered around trying to find food. That's like all they did. Technology, which when we think of technology today, we think of like iPhones and computers and games and stuff like that. But technology then were tools and methods crafted to perform tasks. That was technology too. The Paleolithic people were the first to use technology. Climate affected how Paleolithic people lived, as I'm sure you can imagine. Just like we live different here than people in Alaska might live or people in Hawaii might live. People in different parts of the world live differently depending on the climate. And that is just, they might need different housing or shelter depending on how cold or warm it was. They might wear different clothes. They would eat different foods, all depending on the climate. Okay, I'm going to fix this typo really quick. So then life became less difficult for the Paleolithic people once they discovered how to make fire, as I'm sure you can imagine. With fire, they could cook their food and make it last longer. They could warm themselves. They could scare off animals, all of these things. One very important advancement that took place during the Paleolithic Age, besides technology and fire, was the development of spoken language. So before they had the spoken language, they would communicate in grunts and gestures and pointing and things like that. The Ice Ages were a major environmental disturbance during the Paleolithic age, as you can imagine. But during the Ice Ages, ocean levels lowered because a lot of it was frozen, exposing a strip of land, dry land, connecting the continents of Asia and North America. This was a land bridge. And because of this, Paleolithic peoples could move and settle in different areas. So that's how they got out of just certain areas and populated the entire, many areas of the world. All right, So now we're going to talk about the agricultural revolution. Hopefully everything I just went over is review. So the agricultural revolution, this is when they started to farm and kind of grow their own food, domesticate animals and things like that. And then they could stay in one place. So that's why it was so important. This is a quote from your book from the very beginning, but I thought it was really important because it kind of summarizes the whole lesson that we're going to be going over this week. So it is impossible to overestimate the influence that agriculture and the domestication, which is taming to live with people, of animals has had on human civilization. Not only has it increased the density of the population, but it has also produced a communal life by concentrating people who have mutual interests in flocks, herds, and land cultivation. Sorry, another typo. All right. Okay, so it has helped people to basically develop communities. The earliest people were nomads who moved from place to hunt animals and gather plants. And that's what we just learned about when we learned about the hunters and gatherers. After the last ice age ended, Earth's temperature rose, and as the climate warmed, many nomads moved to areas with a mild climate and fertile land. They're like, it's nice here, we don't want to leave. So they found a way to be able to stay put. For the first time, people began staying in one place to grow grains and vegetables. Gradually, farming replaced hunting and gathering as the main source of food. At the same time, people began to domesticate or tame animals for human use. Animals transported goods and provided meat, milk, and wool. All right, so that is that. That's like our little introduction into agriculture and the effect that that had on early humans. Okay, so now looking at our language and literature for today. Again, we are just reading Boy of the Painted Cave because it's such a short day. So, Boy of the Painted Cave PDF, if you don't have the book, is here. We are on chapter 10 if you do have your books. Chapter 10, which is page 91. Okay. And then after this, you are going to go into Otis and start your chapter 10 questions. Just a reminder from grading a lot of these over the weekend, please make sure that you are answering in complete sentences. This is a summative grade, so it's really important that you are answering carefully and thoughtfully, and you're making sure to follow all the directions. Sometimes the questions say, cite the text for evidence, and you guys are not always doing that, so you need to make sure that you are. Okay. So chapter 10, a full moon passed and another began, and it was almost summer. Whenever Tao left the little cave to go hunting with Ram, he looked out over the valley to be sure that Volt or Garth and the other hunters were not around. Now he looked across the verdant grassland, warm and bright in the early morning sunlight. He saw noisy flocks of dusty brown linnets fly over the meadows, settling at times to rest and feed, then rising up again like a tawny cloud. Small bands of horses grazed alongside saiga antelopes as they wandered across the open field. But this morning, Tao saw no man, no hunter. Everything seemed quiet and peaceful. Then he saw something far off in the distance. He strained his eyes, but he could make it out only as a long line of great brown bodies moving slowly. It came out of the bottomlands along the river, rolling ponderously onto the plains. Tao knew it was a vast herd of animals, but he could not yet see it clearly. Sometimes it was hidden by a white haze of dust that hovered over it, moving along with it. Then it came into view, a living thing winding its way along. It was still far away, but it was getting closer. Tao held his hand up to his forehead, shielding his eyes from the sun. He looked again. He gasped and felt his heart leap. "They're here, Ram," he cried. "The mountains that walk have come back." He picked up his spear and went down to the cliff, stumbling and sliding to the bottom, with Ram close behind him. Without stopping, they ran out across the valley, racing through the knee-high grass, scattering the game before them. The antelopes went bounding away, the horses whinnied and galloped off. Breathing heavily, the boy and the wolf dog plunged headlong into the swamps. Here they could be downwind from the animals. They could hide in the tall reed grass and watch in safely. Standing in the shallow water, they waited silently as the first groups of mammoths lumbered into the open meadow. Tao pushed aside the reeds to get a better view. He could see the herd clearly now. It was made up of cows, with many yearlings and calves. As tall as the birch trees, some of the older elephant-like animals had long sweeping tusks that curved inward, almost crossing at the ends. Thick hanging mats of reddish-brown hair covered their bodies, all shaggy and disheveled from late spring shedding. So hopefully you guys are getting an idea of what kind of animals we're talking about right now. The calves wandered on either side of the herd, exploring, romping, then running back. Great black-winged vultures soared overhead, circling the herd. Tao counted on his fingers. It was 3 summers since the mountains that walk had come through the valley. Now they were back, and Tao was overwhelmed at the sight of them. Of all the animals in the valley, he loved to watch the mountains that walk best. They were like the earth, massive, shaggy old giants, lumbering out of the dawn. Moving slowly in scattered groups, the monsters plodded along, pulling up great trunkfuls of grass, bending down the willows and birch trees to get at the succulent buds and twigs. Tao was still downwind from the animals. Never had he seen so many. Never had he been so near the gigantic beasts. They were so close he could hear the gurgling rumble of their stomachs. He could smell the musty odor of their bodies and see the clouds of black flies buzzing along their heads. Ram's eyes followed the slow-moving giants, a low, guttural growl coming from deep within his throat. The boy held him tight by the scruff of the neck, and the wolf dog strained until his breathing was almost choked. Tao could feel Ram's body tremble with excitement. "No, Ram," he whispered. "They are too big. You would have no chance against the monsters." The mammoths kept coming and coming, and now they seemed to be everywhere. Then Tao heard sounds behind him, sounds of breaking reeds and sloshing water, sounds of heavy bodies splashing through the swamp. He was no longer downwind. He was no longer safe. They were all around him. Suddenly, one of the lead cows caught the man's scent and sounded the alarm. Long, snake-like trunks swept overhead, searching for the danger. Trumpeting shrieks filled the air. Hurriedly, the calves and yearlings moved into the center of the herd. The shrieks and squeals of the thundering bodies were everywhere. Ram tugged and squirmed, and before Tao could stop him, he pulled away and dashed straight into the milling herd. "Stop, Ram, stop!" Tao shouted, but it was too late. Already the wolf dog was leaping and snapping at the legs of the nearest beast. Tao cried out, shouting again and again, trying to make himself heard, but his voice was drowned out by pounding feet and wild screams. He stood by helplessly as he saw the wolf dog dart from one angry animal to another, dashing between them, nipping at their legs. With amazing quickness, the big animals whirled around, lashing out, striking back at this annoying pest. 2 or 3 times, Tao saw Ram disappear into a jumble of legs and trunks, any minute expecting him to be thrown into the air or impaled on a long curved tusk. Once the wolf dog was caught up by a swinging trunk and sent sprawling into the swamp grass. But Ram was quick. He leaped to his feet and charged again, snapping, jumping, dodging out of the way, almost toying with the enraged beast as the boy looked on in horror. Noises filled the swamp. Reeds cracked. The great beasts were crashing through. Tao could feel the earth shake. Wild trumpeting filled his ears, and he heard the slogging footsteps behind him. Slowly, he started to back out of the swamp, but the reed grass grew high overhead, and he could not see the angry monsters floundering all around him. He could only hear them sloshing through the window, coming closer and closer. He waited silently, hoping they would turn their back or go on their way, but the sounds only grew louder. One step at a time, he backed away through the tall grass as the plodding beasts came on. With a sinking feeling, he realized that one of the big cows was following him. Tao stood perfectly still, listening to the heavy footsteps and the pounding of his heart. She's there, he thought, and she knows I am waiting. Then he saw the reeds bend and crack, and he heard the splash of water as the animal broke through the tall grass. A huge cow loomed up over him, standing like a dark shadow, water dripping from her long reddish-brown hair. Tao's eyes were wide with fright. She was much bigger than he expected. Her great shaggy head hung over him, sharp curving tusk glistened in the sunlight. She lifted her trunk and let out an ear-splitting scream of anger. Tao whirled around. There was no place to run. He stepped back, recklessly trying to force his way through the reeds. The jagged edges scratched his bare arms. For a moment, the monster towered over him, a low, rumbling growl coming from deep within her chest. The boy stumbled backwards, falling into the reeds. He got up quickly, dripping swamp water from his arms and face. At that moment, the mammoth charged. With a wild shriek, she lunged at him, stomping, splashing through the water, kicking up showers of slime and mud. Tao dropped his spear. He threw up his arms to protect his face as the hairy giant came on. A long trunk reached out and gripped him around the waist. It lifted him bodily up into the air and then threw him crashing into the reed grass. With the wind knocked out of him, Tao lay in the murky waters, trying to catch his breath. He felt stabs of pain. His arms and legs were cut and bleeding. Slowly, he rolled out on his back as the stagnant water sloshed around his shoulders. He looked up and saw the tops of the reed grass waving overhead. He started to get up. Then, with a feeling of awesome terror, he saw the great beast standing above him. Her legs were like hairy logs, and she lifted one giant foot and held it over him. She started to bring it down. Tao rolled out of the way just as the foot splashed in the water beside him. But the angry brute lifted her foot again. Tao looked up at the cracked, leathery sole about to come down on his head. Just then, he saw a flash of gray fur plunge into the reeds. It was Ram, flinging himself at the raging mammoth. He badgered her, harassed her, nipping at her legs. She spun around, lashing back at him, but Ram leaped and dodged, staying clear of the swinging trunk. Tao lay still for a moment, his eyes wide with fear. Slowly he started to get up, his fingers groping for his spear. Just as he got to his feet, the mammoth turned again to face him. With a loud shriek, she started to charge. But the great beast never reached him. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the wolf dog chasing her calf, which had come up behind her. Instantly, she whirled around and went crashing through the reeds after them. Mud spattered and tired, Tao stood in the tall reeds, waiting, listening, afraid to move. Slowly the sound of the thundering herd rumbled off into the distance. When he was sure it was safe, Tao began washing the dirt and mud from his arms and legs, still bleeding from the cuts and scratches of the sharp reed grass. Painfully, he limped out of the swamp. In the distance, he could see a rising cloud of dust, and he knew that the great herd had reformed and was continuing on its way. With an uneasy feeling, Tao followed the tracks of the wandering beasts, hoping he would not find Ram trampled in the dust. He had not gone far when he saw the wolf dog loping toward him through the meadow, his sides heaving, his tongue hanging. He was wet, his gray coat caked with mud. Tao threw his arms around the animal's neck, burying his face in the wet fur. "You are brave, Ram," he said, "but you are foolish. The mammoths are not rabbits. They are dangerous." Ram's eyes were bright, and he was panting heavily from his wild run. "This time I was lucky," said Tao. "You saved my life. Never again will I let you chase the mountains that walk." All right, so at this time, you're going to go into Otis, answer your questions for Chapter 10, and then that'll be your day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.